Welcome. My name is Rick de Vreese. I'm working at the European Forest Institute, where I'm part of the Resilience Program and leading the team in urban forestry. I have a master in applied biological sciences and did a PhD in human ecology at the University of Brussels. My research interest is in urban forestry, peri-urban green spaces, and ecosystem services. So, let's start with this introduction video on ecosystem services provided by urban forests. In this video, we'll discuss the concept of ecosystem services. This concept has gained importance since the publication of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, or MEA, in 2005. Ecosystem services are defined as all the benefits that people obtain from ecosystems. The Millennium Ecosystem Assessment has discerned 4 categories of ecosystem services: provisioning services, regulating services, cultural services, and finally supporting services. In what comes next, we will take a closer look to these different categories. The first category is the provisioning services category. This includes fruit from trees, berries from shrubs or mushrooms, and other types of food collected in the urban forest. Moreover, it includes fruit from hunting or products from the so-called food forests. Provisioning services provided by the urban forest also include timber and wood, also including firewood or other fibers from trees and forests in the urban and peri-urban area. Additionally, urban forests can produce fresh water and drinking water. Overall, rural areas produce more provisioning services than urban forests. For example, food production in agriculture or wood production through large-scale forestry is much more important in rural areas than in urban areas. The second category, the regulating ecosystem services, includes those services that are obtained from the regulation capacity of ecosystems. The most important regulation service provided by urban forests and urban trees are regulating temperatures, mainly lowering the temperature peak during heat waves, controlling flood, stormwater and erosion, and the purification of air, and to a lesser extent purification of water. Other regulating ecosystem services where urban forests and urban trees can play a role include pollination, carbon storage, and disease and pest control. The third category, the cultural ecosystem services, are related to the non-material benefits obtained from urban ecosystems. The most important ones are probably the contribution from urban nature, urban forests and urban trees to an improved human health and well-being. This includes both physical and mental health, but also providing opportunities for recreation and tourism. Also, the aesthetic values and the perception of beauty related to forests and trees are important cultural ecosystem services, as well as an increased nature connectedness and a sense of place and sense of belonging. Urban green spaces facilitate social cohesion and education and training, and they can also be important for spiritual and religious reasons. Urban green spaces also have a positive impact on the economy through reducing healthcare costs, increasing property value, and increasing spending in retail areas, or providing jobs through green care and management of urban forests and urban trees. Finally, the last category, the supporting ecosystem services, is related to the ecosystem processes that support the production of the other categories of ecosystem services. The supporting services include photosynthesis, salt formation, nutrient cycling, and providing habitats for fauna and flora. Nature does not only produce ecosystem services but also disservices. These ecosystem disservices are defined as functions of ecosystems that are perceived as negative for the human well-being. And it includes important impacts like people getting hurt through falling trees, or less important nuisances such as cars that are polluted through animal excrement. Other disservices can be caused by falling leaves, branches or fruits, or trees that block views and light. and for instance can lead to reduced production of solar panels. The services with more important impacts include damages to infrastructure and injuries through falling trees and branches, especially during storms. And as said, excrements from animals, but also roots, can cause damages to buildings, pavements, and cars. So before, we have seen that urban forests and urban trees can contribute positively to human health and well-being, but there can also be a negative effect of trees and forests. Trees can negatively impact the air quality through the emission of volatile organic compounds, which leads to smoke, particulate matter, and ozone-related problems. Allergenity to pollen released by trees is impacting about 30% of the population, and green areas can contribute to spread of pests and diseases, and people sometimes feel at unease in urban green spaces. So what is the mechanism behind the delivery of ecosystem services? This is described in what we call the ecosystem service cascade. The delivery of ecosystem services is grounded in the biophysical properties of the ecosystem, here shown as the first part of the cascade. It includes three parts: the structure of the ecosystem, for example the habitat type or the type of vegetation. Secondly, the processes that are occurring in the ecosystem, like photosynthesis or primary growth. The third part of the ecosystem service cascade is the biophysical conditions for ecosystem functioning. This includes, for example, the production of biomass or the slowing down of water flows or providing space to people to visit urban forests. These functions provide the capacities to deliver an ecosystem service. The next step in the cascade itself is the delivery of the ecosystem services. For example, reducing the temperature during the heat wave. All these three steps are bound to the so-called biosphere, or the environmental aspects of the ecosystem service cascade. Now we focus on the social and economic part of the ecosystem service cascade. This is the place where the contribution of ecosystem services to improving human well-being is happening. A first step in this part of the cascade is recognizing the benefits that ecosystem services provide to the society. This can both refer to material and non-material benefits. An example of such material benefit is the use of the wood for furniture. An example of a non-material benefit is feeling thankful when somebody is seeing the autumn colors of the forest. And finally, the fifth step in the ecosystem service cascade is attaching the value to the ecosystem service. This value can be monetary. For example, the income an urban forest manager is receiving when he is selling the wood of the forest. But also non-monetary values can be assigned to ecosystem services. An example of this monetary value is the intrinsic value, that is referring to the value that people assign to nature on its own right, and irrespective of the direct human use. A second type of non-monetary value is a social value relating to the importance that people assign to, for example, spiritual values for a specific forest. Finally, a third non-monetary value is the economic value that can be assigned to ecosystem services. For example, the amount of drinking water or the amount of wood produced by an urban forest. Every aspect in this ecosystem service cascade can be influenced, adapted or changed through policy, landscape planning or management interventions. Policy and decision-making influences all elements in the cascade, and there is an interaction between societal preferences reflected in the values and policy decisions. Policy also influences the landscape planning and management interventions, and on their turn these are impacting the functioning and the characteristics of the ecosystems. So let us explain the cascade now through an example on how urban trees contribute to decreasing temperatures in the city during heat waves. The first part of the cascade is the structure, and in this example the structure is defined by the tree, the broadleaf tree, which is standing in a grass lawn. This can be measured by the percentages of tree canopy and the NDVI, or the normalized difference vegetation index. The second step, the ecosystem services processes involved here is photosynthesis, evaporation and the transpiration by the tree. The tree is also providing shade, which also is a process involved in reducing the temperature of the city close to trees. The third step is the functions. The third step are the functions. The function involved here is the reduced land surface and the reduced air temperature through the processes of evapotranspiration and shading. Finally, the ecosystem service produced is the regulating of the temperature. And the associated benefit is a reduced mortality and morbidity. This has an associated value due to avoided healthcare costs and an increased quality of life. Finally, we will have a look into flower diagrams as graphical tools to show the relative importance of different ecosystem services for a specific ecosystem or space. We will look at 3 examples, as you can see here. The first example is an urban forest with a highly ecological value. The second example is a wooded cemetery, and the third example is a single street tree. The example of the ecological valuable urban forest scores high for most ecosystem services. It scores high for habitat provision, but it is also scoring high for recreation opportunities. As you can see, particularly during the bluebell season, this is a very attractive forest and lots of people are visiting the forest. The wood, in this case beechwood, is very high quality, so the wood production is important, and also the income from wood production is important. The forest has high impact on regulating the temperature of its environment because it is quite large. And also the impact on the human health and well-being is important because a lot of people are living around the forests and there is a high number of people visiting the forests regularly. The forest has a moderate impact on the local air quality as it is situated in an area where air pollution is rather limited. And as you can see from this very nice picture, the aesthetic quality is very high due to the bluebells in the forest. The spiritual value is very high, as identified by visitors to the forest. The second example is a wooded cemetery in the middle of the city. This is scoring also very high on the aesthetic quality and spiritual quality due to the outspoken character of the old graveyards surrounded by groups of trees. The wood production is less important as the quality of the wood is less good, and the wood is only used by a local small company to produce tables. The habitat quality is very high because this is a very unique ecosystem of mosses on the old graves in combination with the old trees. Recreation potential is rather low, but the temperature regulation is high because of the high number of people living around the area. This also leads to high impact on human health and well-being. As the forest is downwind of heavy industry, the air quality improvement service is very high. Finally, we have the single tree here at the corner of streets in the city center. It scores quite low or moderate to most ecosystem services because it's very small. Although it has a local impact on the temperature and the human health, and neighbors love the tree. So because this blossoming, as you can see, is very attractive. So the aesthetical quality is very high. This concludes the introduction of ecosystem services provided by urban forests and urban trees. We have discussed the different ecosystem services that are provided by urban forests and urban trees. We have discussed the ecosystem service cascade and have given an example of how urban forests and urban trees following the cascade lead to lower temperature in the cities. Finally, we have illustrated the use of flower diagrams to illustrate the importance of specific ecosystem services for an ecosystem.